more NX rumors. Essentially, I've read some rumors that the NX apparently is going to be, as far as streaming video, like I guess Netflix is going to be able to hit 4K resolutions, but its video games are only going to be at 900p. Further going on with the rumor that it's only going to be as powerful as, say, the Xbox, though the Xbox can hit 1080p sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah, it's a survey that purportedly Nintendo sent to its users and I guess developers and stuff like that. But it was basically, from what I understand, from what I read, it was a leaked survey asking questions about what people want to see on the next Nintendo system. And one of the questions was a system that can run, at 60 frames per second, 900p, and stream
Yeah.
4K video and things like that. So yeah, it didn't really reveal technical specifications of the NX, and Nintendo is staying silent on that subject as much as
Yeah.
they possibly can because no official announcements have been made. But there are other rumors floating around. The newest rumor I heard was that it's going to launch a $200 handheld system and then months later launch the companion $300 base system. So the NX will actually be a two-part system that's going to be launched one part at a time, which I think is ridiculous. But
It is ridiculous, but it makes sense to me because its original Nintendo timeline is right now. This is supposed to be the year where we get the 3DS's successor. Is how their
well,
timeline works. So
but didn't they just spend all year last year trying to sell us the new DS? Like,
yeah,
so
to make money off of us.
aren't
So
people going to be a little pissed off when they bought a brand new DS and then find out that the next mobile system they'll have to buy it in order to play on the next gaming system, the home system? I mean, if it's a requirement to have both pieces, then I don't know.
I
Is
could
it
see
any better than
Nintendo
the Wii
doing. I
U?
could see Nintendo doing this. I could see Nintendo doing a bundle where you get the handheld and the console at the same time, if this is true. Um, and it'd of course be more expensive, because both of them would be combined. But I could see them to give early access. Release the handheld first, and then release the base system. But also, when you release the base system, have it, just the base system, so the people who already bought your handheld can just buy the base system, and then you do a bundle where it comes with the handheld and the base system together. So you
Yeah.
don't have to, you don't have to buy one and then have to buy the other. You could just buy them both at the same time.
Yeah, but
And make
either way, the main rumor that seems to be have the most credibility right now is that the NX is going to be on par with current gen systems. So that it's not like it's going to blow away, and be the next leap in hardware technology. It's
no, no,
probably going to
definitely.
focus. It's probably
I
going to focus on the gameplay and the gimmicky nature of however the form
which
factor
I
is going to
think
play
is
out.
a mistake. I think is a
Well, I mean, it
huge
depends.
mistake. I don't like it. I don't think they should do a leap ahead, but I do think they should make a console that is more powerful than its competitors. That way, when your competitors, who are coming out with their next systems here in about, let's see, it's 2016 now, 2018, 2019. So we got about 2, 3 years till the next PlayStation, till the next Xbox. You want to make sure your console is going to be at least somewhat competitive on a hardware, I think, spec until you come out with your next system. You know what I mean? You don't want to just
Yeah.
be on par with the current gen. You want to be just
Well,
slightly more powerful. I'm not saying do a leap ahead. Just make sure you're on par with the PS4 at least, not the Xbox One.
you're gonna have to have some significant power to run 60 frames per second at 900p. I'm not saying that's right now a lot of people are saying 1080p at 30 frames a second is pretty much what the PS4 does, is it can be capable of doing. And the thing from the survey is just a recommendation for developers. They want best case scenario games should run at 60 frames per second at 900p. Not to say that you could do any better or that every game is going to run that. And it's actually not an unobtainable bar to set if their hardware is on par with current gen systems. But like Nintendo is want to do, I think they're going to focus less on the hardware and more on the experience. I was playing my Wii U today, and I don't really ever play the Wii U. And one of the most frustrating things about it was the gamepad was in the other room charging, and I couldn't do anything on the console system settings wise without the
Oh,
gamepad.
yeah.
And then when I went to go play Mario Kart, I was playing with a arcade pro controller, and I couldn't turn off my dying Wii U pad, the gamepad, without turning the system off. There's no way to turn off it's like the gamepad has to be on for the system to run. So it's already a 2-part system. Is the NX just going to be a smaller Wii U gamepad that you can dock onto the system itself instead of having a different charging port? I mean, is it going to be another system where you need both parts to run at the same time, and once the mobile system's battery dies, then you're constrained to the console or a charger? I don't know.
No, I think they learn. I think though, Nintendo has always been good about learning their lessons, so to speak.
Yeah, put those nuts in your mouth, Donovan.
I love them.
No, but I was gonna say, they had the 64 controller, which I think we can all agree. It worked. The 64 controller worked great with the games it was designed for. But come on, I think we can all admit it. That was a fucking weird motherfucking controller. And then they came out with the GameCube controller, which I argue is one of the best controllers. I mean, sure, it's a little small to my adult hands now, but it's a decently designed controller. So I think Nintendo is going to learn their lessons from this gamepad fiasco, which is true. I tried. When I came down back home, I forgot my gamepad. I had to borrow yours because half my games don't work without the gamepad.
Yeah, I can't even control my home screen or switch back and forth between my system settings and stuff, or change anything without the gamepad. And another thing is, like you said, the Nintendo GameCube controller is one of the weirder controllers in my opinion. It's very weird shape. It's very small. The Nintendo 64 worked great for the games that it had, but I just would love to see the NX change the controller button scheme to put the A on the bottom of the fucking controller, because every time I pick up and I'm trying to play the Nintendo, I'm always canceling everything with the B button instead of accepting with the A button, because they're backwards.
I don't see why they just didn't do a DualShock, because let's be honest, I'm sorry if you're a fan of Sony, Sony's controller is a fucking ripoff of the Super Nintendo. It's always been, they just put in 2 grips and put in 2 thumbsticks, but besides that, it's a fucking Super Nintendo controller. Why didn't Nintendo just continue with that design?
There's only a limited number of forms that a controller can have, and still, because you have to hold it like this, and all the buttons have to be reachable with your thumbs, and maybe a couple triggers for your fingers. But other than that, the Wii U gamepad is cumbersome. I hate playing games with it.
Yeah.
The whole thing is very light and feels cheap. The LCD screen, the touchscreen is not capacitive, so there's no pinch and zoom. And it's also very, very poor quality. When my kid's playing and he's using the game screen as the screen, he's having to hold it closer to his face. And as much the console is reliant on the gamepad, I feel like the gamepad should be heavy and feel more substantial, and have maybe share the hardware load or something. It just seems like it's nothing more than just a controller with a screen on.
In a very, very short range from the console.
Yeah, I can hardly go in the next room.
I can't take it to the fucking bathroom to watch Pornhub.
Yeah. That's why the Pornhub viewership numbers are so low on the Wii.
Yeah, that's exactly right. No, I was gonna say though, I try to use the Pro controller, but even the Pro controller is like, what the fuck? You obviously are copying the Xbox controller, but they put the 2 sticks at the top. Here, I can show you. I don't know if I know Jonathan has it, but I don't know if you have it, Donovan.
I have a third-party Pro controller.
Look, Donovan,
it's a small one.
Here's the Wii U Pro controller.
What does that look like to
you? What does this look like?
An Xbox One controller.
The Xbox.
Yeah, except they put the 2 sticks here at the top. So it's
which is stupid already.
Yeah, because it doesn't leave you enough room to move your thumb. You have to move your thumb down instead of over to the buttons where they need to be.
So it's just kind of like they obviously tried copying the Xbox 360 controller.
Look, I got the perfect design for a controller. Remember that South Park episode where they had that car that you drove? I think it was called the It or something.
Yeah.
I think they should make a controller. Yeah, they should make it They should make a controller just like that. It'll work perfectly.
You know what
Everyone will be happy.
controller I really enjoyed was the Dreamcast controller. It had those really deep wings, and I could get my fingers into those wings, and I a lot of the times when I was playing a game, I would be able to apply outward pressure with my fingertips inside of those wings and leave more mobility for my thumbs. I really liked the Dreamcast
I will
controller.
say this,
I thought it was comfortable.
the Xbox controller, I will argue, is the successor to the Dreamcast, especially the original Xbox controller. Look at the designs. It's clear that
I like it.
that the Xbox controller is an evolution of the Dreamcast
Yeah.
controller.
I don't like the current one. I don't like the current one. And you know why it's really funny? It's because they covered up little screw holes, and that's where I always placed my fingers. I know that's weird,
Yeah.
but I would always mess with the screw holes at the bottom of the controller, and then they covered it up in this more recent one.
I've actually gotten used to it, but I didn't like where the shoulder buttons were at because I got so used to holding my controller like this with the 360 controller, and with the Xbox One you can't really like hold it like it's the shoulder buttons are different. The mold is different.
I wish Nintendo would release a system with a decent controller, because the Wii, that little chocolate bar thing, you try to play any games and you turn it sideways, play Mario Party and stuff like that, and it was innovative for motion control, but when you actually wanted to use it to play something, it's great. And it was too small in the sharp corners, and I
don't feel like getting it out right now because I don't feel like it. But I have
keep it in your pants.
I have an adapter where you can use a Super Nintendo controller, or you can use an original Nintendo controller for your
cool.
Wii U, which is what I like to use when I play games where it's like where you have to take the controller and put it to the side. I just use the adapter, and I just use the original Nintendo controller. It works great. So please, Nintendo, don't do... I mean, look at already the fiasco. I mean, the Xbox One, when it first came out, couldn't hit 1080p, and people made a fucking big deal out of it.
But that's sort of like hype, right? I mean, that's the hype. Like, you can't even hit 1080p. Well, you know what? It doesn't have to be 1080p to look really fantastic.
I totally agree. It doesn't have to. What I find funny is when they compare Tomb Raider Definitive Edition, the PS4 edition hits 1080p, 60 frames per second, but it keeps dropping down to like 40.
It's hard to hold 60
40.
frames. Yeah, it's
hard to hold.
Wouldn't you rather have a more stable 30 frames per second?
Yeah, I was going to say they make fun of the Xbox One version, which is 900p, I believe, and it hits 30 frames per second, and it dips, but it only dips to like 25 frames, sometimes 24.
I think it was a while back ago. You sent me a video, Sean, of the people playing the PC, the Xbox, and the PlayStation games, and everyone they couldn't tell the difference between the graphics, so it doesn't really fucking matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Especially because if you think about it, especially for consoles, you're sitting 10 feet away from your television, which, by the way, you can't really tell the difference between 900p and 1080p at like 10 feet away. And what's really funny is 1080p isn't a thing anymore because everyone's moving on to 4K.
Yeah.
But because it's such a big deal on the internet and with people, that's why I think it would be a bad move for Nintendo to do 900p, because there would be a bunch of people getting on going, oh, they can't hit 1080p. That's
it's really up to the developers, right? I mean, if the developers make a game that can't hit those requirements or those suggested requirements, then it doesn't really matter how capable the system is. I mean, they just released gameplay footage this week of Ark Survival Evolved or whatever running on a PlayStation 4, and the gameplay looked like shit. There was screen tearing, there was all kinds of lag, the frame rates were dropping below 20 frames per second during like lag sessions and shit. It looked horrible. And even though the PlayStation 4 is capable of 1080p at 30 frames per second or a lower resolution at 60 frames per second, that game looks like shit because it's not a well-made game or whatever the problems are. So if having a game system that wants developers to shoot for a more obtainable sort of frame rate and resolution in order to make the gameplay between games from third-party developers more consistent on its console, I think that that's an admirable move as far as from the standpoint of the consumer getting a consistent experience from that system.
And I will also argue the PS4 can hit 1080p better than the Xbox One, but it also can't hit 1080p that well. And I think Microsoft and Sony, specifically Sony, because that's one of their selling points. We have a better resolution than the Xbox One, should just drop it. and just let game developers come out with a game that runs really well on their system instead of
Yeah.
preaching this 1080p gospel bullshit.
Well, it's like the old Bit Wars, now
Yeah.
instead of now it's like, oh,
The
what's the
resolution wars,
resolution
yeah.
gonna be? Yeah.
Which doesn't, resolution and graphics aren't the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's just resolution's just how clearly you see the graphics, but the
Yeah.
graphics are still there.